Hello and welcome. Welcome back to the Business of Happiness podcast. Hi, guys. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn McCarthy. And today is going to be a really great day because I have a phenomenal guest with me today. It is Dr. Karen Leitner, and she is the founder of Karen Leitner MD Coaching. And her work focuses specifically on strategies for women in medicine, helping them enhance their well-being, helping them reduce burnout, support their leadership, and their career development. And she's also an ambassador for the Lorna Breen Foundation, whose mission it is to reduce burnout among healthcare professionals. So please join me today in welcoming my new great friend, Dr. Karen Leitner. Hello, Karen.
Hello. This is fun to become friends so quickly. We've barely know each other, but it's just like instant friend.
It was really great. I'm so excited that the universe brought us together. It's just so awesome. And I'm even more excited to introduce you to my audience. So welcome. And thank you so much for being here on the podcast.
Thank you. Hello, audience.
Yeah. I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your journey. So many women listening to this podcast identify with their own experience of overdoing, overworking, overgiving, and burnout in dentistry. And I'd love for you to reflect a little bit of your journey in medicine and what that looked like for you and how you came to be coaching women in medicine now from this very empowered place.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I would say I went into medicine wanting to be really kind and lovely to patients. I just thought, how hard can that be? I'll just be super nice. Like early people pleasing tendencies right there, and had a hard time in training. I did a med peds residency. It was 4 years. I was single. I would say depressed, and I was super stressed out and anxious by taking care of such sick people. Why I chose that field. Sorry, my pen just freaked out. I was like, oh, maybe if I just get really good tools to take care of super sick people, I won't be so anxious about it. Well, it sort of worked. It sort of didn't. So when I finally left after those 4 long years, I was like, I don't know. I don't know if this is for me. And I felt a lot of shame about that. I thought, why am I different than some of the people I'm in training with? Why do I feel so much more stressed out when I do call, or that I might be responsible for something bad happening to someone? That was like a lot of existential angst for me. So I raise it in case there are other people who feel that way, because I just feel like the conversation was lacking. And if I did ask for some kind of help, I did go to therapy. It was more about my being single and not wanting to, but I just never felt like I had a dean in medical school I talked to about feeling kind of depressed. I didn't really get any response. And then I was telling one of my mentors who was supervising me, like, I feel just like very overwhelmed and anxious. And she was like, isn't that just how you are? And we know now that the statistics on internship, I mean, even just like suicidal thinking, and I don't know what it is in the dental field. And it's actually interesting. I tried to research that recently for a talk I gave. And it seems like there's some conflicting data that at one point people thought dentists had very high suicide rates. And now it doesn't seem like that might be true. But I don't have access to all that data. So that's a big question mark for me. Maybe you can answer that for me when I finish. Gosh, I have to speed us up because we have like 25 years to go through to get to the present day. So I got a dream job after I finished training. I was going to take care of patients. I was at like a Harvard affiliated community health center kind of place. My colleagues were amazing. They had been there for a long time. They were brilliant, kind people trying to do, God's work. And the patient mix was really interesting too, because it was like a mixture of health safety net kind of people, but also like Harvard and MIT teaching faculty and like .com, software people. So it's just a very interesting practice setting. And what happened pretty quickly was I met my husband right at the end of training, got married, had a baby. And that was just like, suddenly, how am I going to deal with all this? So stressed out about the volume of patients I was caring for, my kiddo, feeling guilty I wasn't home with her enough. And then I had a second kid. 7 years go by. I find myself on vacation with my nanny and my 2 children and my husband, super, super privileged, feeling guilty that I was at a buffet line. I was trying to like get a plate for myself, holding my baby, my toddler's over there, my baby shoving Cheerios down my shirt. And I was like, I can't even feed myself on vacation. And then it was this dread of going back to work and like all the things that were going to be hiding in my inbox. I felt like it was like a tidal wave that was going to kill me. And I was just like, I have to get out of here. Like, I just can't do this. It was self-preservation. People sometimes say to me like, wow, that was so brave, or that was so courageous. I was just like, no, I didn't feel like I had a choice. It's like me or my mental health is just in the toilet. So I left and didn't even know burnout was a thing. I was like
Mm,
talking about it. Okay, to make a long story long, I thought it was the job. I thought I just had to switch the job. So then I did like 10 other jobs and still felt a lot of this like discontent because now I'm on the other side of things. I'm like, why can everyone else handle it and I couldn't? Right. So the way we talk to ourselves and think about ourselves is so critical and not very kind. So eventually, somehow, I heard a coaching podcast, just very random. And it started talking about how your thoughts create your feelings. And I was like, wait, my thoughts create my feelings? That's why I feel unfulfilled. And that's why I feel anxious. And I just went down this path of like listening to a billion coaching podcasts, hiring
mm,
to help me learn these tools for myself, to help myself learn to think differently. And it just opened up a whole other universe for me. And then during the pandemic, it's my doorbell and my dog. I started coaching women doctors and I had found another role that I really enjoyed. And then we got acquired by a
mm.
big telehealth company. And I found all of the similar sort of feeling undervalued and underappreciated. And I was so that was what pushed me to get coached to help my brain be able to show up for interviews in a way that felt good to me. And then it was so useful. I stayed one more year in that job, but I started my coaching business in 2020 and it never looked back. I love it so much. It's been perfect for me.
Thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate it because I think you touched on so many components of our shared experience as women in healthcare, regardless of being in medicine or dentistry. I love that image of you on vacation, trying to hold it all together, trying to be on vacation, spend time with your family, and that stress and anxiety that followed you even on vacation and just kind of consumed your thoughts. And that image of you trying to hold yourself, and then that self shaming of, I can't even do this, I can't even
Mhm.
feed myself. And I just want to honor that for a moment because I think so many of us have that self judgment, that self critiquing that really compiles that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness.
Mhm.
I'd love for you to speak a little bit about this because I think women don't tend to ask for help
Mhm.
very easily. And women in higher education positions like medicine or dentistry, I think are less likely to ask for help. And what is your experience? That's my perception. I don't have any data to
Mhm.
support this, but my perception is if you're the boss, if you're the doctor, if you're leading the team, it feels like we're less likely to ask for help, especially when we're in that place of shame.
Oh my God, yes. I could talk about
Mhm.
this like all day long. I'm so happy we got right to it because it's so layered and complicated. But I would start with we as women, socialized as women, we are the helpers. We are the
Mm,
caretakers. We are the nurturers. Our value actually, like a couple hundred years ago, we had no value. We weren't educated. We couldn't go out. We couldn't own property. Our value was in the helping of others. We didn't think we had any intrinsic value otherwise. So that's pretty profound, right? And a friend of mine wrote a book. It's called Defining Wealth for Women, but it talks about how we couldn't even have a credit card in your name without your spouse's signature before 1974. Hasn't been that long.
no.
So it's baked into us. It's not like we were born as women and we're just like, oh, I have the helping gene. It's like society messaged it to us. And then I think as healers, there's a whole other level of that. It's like, I am the help. I fix you.
Exactly.
I'm not weak. And it's like, man up, work these crazy hours, work these crazy shifts. I don't know if that's what it's like was for your training, but I have to imagine it's very similar. It's like, you don't complain, you don't show emotion. It's also like a very patriarchal based, it's like designed around how men like were when, I don't know when the first woman was allowed into dental school, but in medicine too, it's like residency was designed around men's schedules because they all had wives at home who could take care of all that stuff. And then we try to insert ourselves into this paradigm that it's not meant for us. And then we use it against ourselves. So those are two big pieces of it. And then I think like somehow we don't even recognize that when you let people help you, you're doing a kind thing for them. Think about how good it feels
Yes.
to help someone else. But we think I can't ask that of someone. So it's like very complicated. And I coach people on that a lot. And you have to kind of unlearn some of what's already been indoctrinated into us to get past that. It's not easy. What do you think?
It's not. And I think there's an interesting dynamic that we work with when we're in practice as doctors, working with nurses, working with assistants, working with other team members who, number one, are making less money than we are, who might be working more hours or similar hours. And we create this kind of, I think you said it perfectly, who am I to complain? Right? We feel a certain amount of privilege, definitely. And then that even compounds onto feeling less entitled to ask for support or to quote unquote complain.
Yeah. Yeah. And somehow we think if like this keeps coming up, this is such a seductive and poisonous thought. It's like somehow if I was better, I wouldn't need help. If I was better, I could do all this. And it's like, that is a crazy thing to think. It's like all these external factors I have no control over, how many patients I see, how the healthcare system is reimbursed, how much support there is, how many, if my kid is sick or, and then our brain is like, oh, but if I was good, I could handle all of this. So we we weaponize that against ourselves, and it causes us so much pain and suffering. And we just think that thought, and we think like, oh, that's true. Yeah, I'm just not good enough. That's why this feels so hard and overwhelming. Like, no, that's not why.
Oh, it's so seditious. You're so right. Yeah. And it just starts leaking into the way we talk about ourselves. So anyone who's listening to this podcast right now, who's recognizing this tendency in herself, who's recognizing, oh, if I were better, or I'm not good enough, or she looks like she's doing it, what's wrong with me that I can't do it? What is one first step that you can recommend for them to have a shift in the way they speak to themselves?
Well, I almost feel like first you have to start noticing that you speak to yourself at all. That's the first step. Is just start paying attention to what you're saying to yourself. And be careful because it's usually very negative. And when you actually start to notice it, you're like, oh my God, that's so mean. But you can't change it until you start to notice it. Can I tell you a funny little story about something that just happened to me yesterday? Because it was like, I don't know about you, but even as I've studied, I think sometimes people think like, oh, you're a coach and you have all this experience, right, and you helped all these people, so you must not do this. And you don't even realize it. So it was the Super Bowl here, and my husband wanted to go to this party. I have 3 daughters. One of them was at her boyfriend's house. One of them was at a movie party. And my littlest one was with my husband doing this pottery thing that we had helped her do, but she doesn't like to be home alone. So it was like my husband's party was at 6:30, my party was at 6:30, but I was waiting for him to come home, give me the little one, so then I could go get my oldest one and come home. And I was going to be late for my party. I was trying so hard to make him not late for his party and get my daughter at the right time and to get my little one not to be home. And I realized again, like I am people pleasing everyone except myself. Now I actually didn't really matter that much if I got to my party on time, but I wasn't even factoring that in. I was just like, everybody else's needs matter so much. And it made me so upset. I was so like stressed and rushed that I like backed out of my driveway and maybe hit another car. Like, I don't even know. And then I was like, why is this happening? I was so upset about it, And so now I'm like, oh, I have to be so careful. I'm doing this. I'm probably doing it way more than I even realize. And I understand why I am, and it's not bad or good. I don't have to judge it, but I have to start to be like, wait, let me remember what I care about alongside what everyone else cares about, and then make some of my decisions. I feel like we don't even put ourselves in the lineup of whose feelings matter.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's such an important distinction. Absolutely. And I think you touched on another really important component is sometimes we busy ourselves to such an extent there's no time to even consider it. We're just operating on this knee-jerk reaction, old habits that we've carried with ourselves for decades and decades. And especially in our professions, when everything is measured by the minute, dentistry sometimes by the second, I don't know about medicine, but we feel like everything is so busy all the time that we don't make the time to stop and ask ourselves, what do I want? What is important to me?
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I mean, I agree. And I'm like, but how long does that take, Tarryn?
Oh, such a great point.
I'm like, I don't have time to care about myself. It's like, well, it takes the same amount of time to be mean to yourself as it does to say something nice to yourself in your mind. So we don't have to, like, the time thing is so, we should maybe move into talking about time. I think
so. Yeah.
Because it's the the narrative we have around our time. I'm just so busy. I'm just so busy. I'm just so busy. I couldn't possibly do this. It's like, yes, but when you tell yourself how you don't have enough time, like you use your time worse and you end up having less time. So even just that gets us in so much trouble. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. And there's the awareness of the thought. There's
Yeah.
not enough time. And if we continue to tell ourselves over and over, there's not enough time in the day, I never have enough time, then that becomes the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, is it that there's not enough time? Or is it that I'm trying to do a full-time job, take care of an entire household by myself, not ask for help, not delegate, not invest in people to support me because I think I should be doing it all myself? Like, what if that's actually because we don't have any control on how much time there is in a day,
Mm-hmm.
but we control all the other things I just said. And it's a little mean. Like, I feel sometimes like to show people that what if it's not time's fault? Like, if it's time's fault, you have no ability to change it. I just wish there existed more time outside in the universe somewhere. It's like, okay, but that's not a thing. So what if it's something you do have control over? What would you start doing? And then it's like, oh, then I have to have boundaries actually. And I have to say no sometimes and I have to disappoint other people. We're like, oh, I'd rather just blame time.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It seems like an easy scapegoat.
Yeah.
And it's one that we all share in our
Yeah,
language.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you read this book, 4,000 Weeks?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
remember when he says, guess what? You're never going to get everything on your to-do list done. So just stop trying. Like
Yeah. I love it.
that to me, I was like, oh my God.
I know. It's so true. It's
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah. You're
And
just never going to catch up. So just now what?
And also how bad that makes you feel when you don't, when you have this weird false expectation that you will.
Mm,
It's
yeah.
this self-judgment again that comes back over and over again. And I think that harsh judgment of ourselves, unlike that of anybody else, we'd never judge anybody else as harshly as we do ourselves.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to also speak something that you speak a lot on, and I've heard you on other podcasts and also in the work that you do, is talking about the moral injury that doctors experience. And I think this is definitely very present for dentists at
Mm-hmm.
this time as dentistry is beginning to take on some very similar patterns as the medical industry has over the past few years. And I'd love you to just speak a little bit about women's experience as doctors in terms of their experience of moral injury and choices and autonomy that they do or don't have.
Hmm. Should I define moral injury to
Please
start?
do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So moral injury is a term apparently that was first coined with regard to soldiers coming back from Vietnam. And there were some who experienced trauma, actually like witnessing horrific things happening and experienced the post traumatic stress disorder, which is, flashbacks and those sorts of it's a well-defined syndrome. So I won't go into that. But there was another kind of distress people were coming home with, which was this idea that had been forced to do things that didn't align with like their values. And so Dr. Wendy Dean is a psychiatrist who published this article called in Stat News, I think it was around 2020, that talked about doctors being in the same scenario when you are forced by the system to, let's say, see patients in a shorter amount of time than you want to. You are prescribing treatments that you don't actually know or have transparency around what the costs are that they might incur on a patient. You're having to fight with insurers to cover treatments and cover medications that are indicated. Even for me, like I remember when I was in practice, we were sort of told we had to refer to a certain group of specialists. And so I might have a patient who I really think could be better suited to go elsewhere, but there's this pressure not to lose that money out of the system that I should refer her or him over here. That's a kind of moral injury. So it's over time when you know you could deliver exceptional care, but you are prevented from doing so, either because the EMR is like sucking the life out of you. I guess it's called the EHR for
Yeah.
dentists. I learned that in my research, but it takes a toll and it
Yeah.
like wears you down. And I believe that's one of the upstream causes of burnout is just recurrent moral injury.
Yeah. I thank you for the clarity there and recognizing the energetic heaviness and the exhaustion that carrying that is, can be in our experience. It's so interesting, Karen. I saw this great I guess it was an interview with a doctor recently who was talking about moral injury, and she was saying how her definition is when, as doctors, we take all the responsibility, and I mean in terms of our licensure and of our Hippocratic oath, and in terms of, even in terms of our malpractice insurance
Mhm.
for our patient care, but we don't have all the choice and autonomy over the decisions that we make.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same thing, and sometimes it really comes down to, so then what do you do with that? Right? Like, you're
Mm,
in a system where you don't have control over the system. What do you do about that? One part I think is to not take responsibility. So when a patient comes in and they're like, "I'm so mad. I only have 15 minutes to spend with you." We tend to be like, "I know, I'm sorry." And spend all this time talking about that. And I help my clients sometimes think about that as like, it's like the corporatization of medicine that's driving that. And if I
mhm,
don't, it's not on me. I don't need to defend it. I don't need to justify it. I don't want to waste the precious time with the patient talking about it. But what I can say is, I totally agree. Here's the card of my CEO. Here's the letter of, like, here's some numbers of state legislators. Let's like reform how primary care is, And then it's like, I'm doing something. I'm like not taking no action, but I'm really keeping my focus on what I do have control over, because we want to feel like we have autonomy as like human beings. So
mm.
what I have control over is that patient in the room. How do I give you the best care right now? Not this energy of like, I'm letting you down. I'm only giving you 15 minutes and it's not enough. And I know it and I feel guilty about it. And I just see that all the time. It's like, you're actually doing your patients a disservice when you bring that energy with you. And I understand why you do, because we do take so much responsibility for everything. I have one other example to kind of give you, and just how this gets a little spun around in our minds, because moral injury for sure is a huge problem, but we also sometimes get in our own way around it. So I had this one client who was born in another country in Latin America. She came here because she thought it was going to be, like the land of plenty. She could have stayed there and helped people there, but she wanted to come here. And she was in a hospital system where it was a lot of Spanish speaking patients who were disenfranchised, and she was a Spanish speaker, and she was like, here I am to deliver care to these people. But because her institution wasn't giving the resources that she wanted, and she felt like she wasn't able to provide like A++ care to them, she took that and decided like, and now I'm complicit, and now I'm part of the problem. And I was like, whoa, 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 pluck you out of there. Now these patients have no one. They have no one who speaks their language. They have no one who advocates for them. Put you back in, like, you are making a huge difference, and you're telling yourself you're not. And that's tragic. I'm like, don't do that, right? Don't like diminish yourself because you're in a system that's broken. Let the system be responsible for itself and do the best you can within that system. It's such a much more empowered. That's how you're going to find fulfillment in your work again. And it's just an attitude shift. What do you think about that?
I think that's absolutely beautiful and wraps right back to what we were saying earlier about really paying attention to that conversation you're having with yourself in your own mind. And
Mhm.
are you being your own greatest advocate and supporter, or are you beating yourself and judging yourself and making yourself feel worse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one other great example of this, which comes up a lot, which is in this idea of like being undervalued.
Mm.
And I think sometimes like the facts are that we are undervalued by our institution, our employer, our boss, our clinic manager, whatever it is. But when we're thinking about that a lot of the time, almost always what I notice is then we undervalue ourselves. Like,
Absolutely.
instead of thinking, my time is so valuable, they are so lucky to have me. I am so incredibly valuable to this place. So I'm going to make sure I use my time the best. I make sure I don't take on work that's not at my level of training. I'm going to make sure I don't work on weekends so I can keep myself mentally safe and healthy to show up. We just go to like, they don't value me, so I'm not good. I must not be good enough. And then we're like outsourcing our value to what someone else thinks about us. And I'm always like, no, you have to know you're valuable. I mean,
Mhm.
you're valuable however much they pay you. That's the value of how they value you. That's it. It's like the monetary value. But if you're working somewhere and you don't feel like the things that they're doing are the way you want things to be, you get to take your valuable self somewhere else. And I use this analogy of sort of like, if you're $100 million house and someone offers you $5 for it, you don't have to feel terrible about it and be like, they undervalue me. You're just like, whatever. Like, no, I'm not going to sell you my house. Like, I'll wait till the person who appreciates it wants to pay me what it's worth. So, and I do a lot of dealing with negotiation too. I guess that's a little bit more of a better analogy for a negotiation, but it's the same idea. It's like we determine our value first. And if someone else doesn't recognize it, it doesn't mean it's not there.
Absolutely. And when you recognize and honor your own value, you actually are able to better serve your patient, better serve your family.
Yeah. You do better work. Like everything is better.
Totally.
To recognize yourself. It's so hard.
Yeah. Well, let me recognize you for a moment because you just had this awesome article in the Boston Globe. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Cool. So I invite all of my listeners. We'll put a link in the show notes to the article because it's very well written and very, very speaks to what we're talking about here today. And I also want to alert my audience to your upcoming course that you run several times a year, but you have one coming up in May that I want them to know about.
All right. Want me to tell them?
Please do.
So I have an 8-week coaching program. It's called How to Feel Better for Women Physicians, for MDs and DOs who are fellows or attendings. And we talk about all this stuff. I mean, I really sort of focus on teaching the thought work tools you and I have talked about to help yourself get out of perfectionism and imposter thinking and have more confidence and stop people pleasing everyone and be more empowered. But it's interesting how, and I don't know if this is your experience too, some of those mindset shifts is what transforms our ability to get all our notes done in real time. So we're not charting all the time, or, find ways to delegate or find ways to self-advocate. So we feel like we have more autonomy around our work environment and then show up better feeling at home too. Because so much of that negativity affects how we are as moms and as parents and our spousal relationships. And it's amazing how much better you can feel in your life when you realize all the agency you do have instead of spinning in all the ways that you feel stuck. So for anyone interested, you could just shoot an email if you want. And I wanted to mention one more thing, Tarryn. I should have mentioned this to you beforehand, but I have this little mini course that I offer. It's inexpensive, but I'd be happy for any podcast listener who wants to listen to it because my program is only for physician MD-DOs, but this could help anybody. I talk about charting. I talk about setting boundaries. I talk about negotiation. I'd be happy to offer it to your audience for free if they wanted it. And they could just email. It's just hello@KarenLeitnerMD.com.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for that gift. That really would be very valuable to so many listeners.
They need it too. Like dentists need so much help.
So much help. And absolutely. And the more we realize that we're more alike than we are different, the more we can kind of combat this division that is so rampant in our society right now and recognize how many similarities we have, the more we can learn and support one another and stop seeing ourselves as other, stop seeing ourselves as less than. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. And, I just want to comment on what you were just saying about how coaching and in your group coaching, and you found this with all your clients as well, is the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And we don't realize that. We don't realize, we just feel like everything feels bad. But if we can make that one little shift, really everything gets better, including your personal relationships and your intimate relationships and your leadership skills and your parenting. It really does impact all parts of your life. And I think sometimes people think that's kind of a sales gimmick, but it really is the truth.
I know. It really is.
Yeah.
And we have all the evidence because it affected us in our lives and then all the people we help.
Yeah.
I know. Can I give one other little tip to your audience just in case it helps, just to see
Please do.
Well, do you feel like people in the dental world deal with charting in the same way that my MD-DO people do? Like, are people doing
absolutely?
So, we talk sometimes about being one thought away from the result you want in your life, just one thought. And so one thought I love to offer my people I coach is, there's a couple actually. It's like the best note is the one I finish right now, right after I see the patient, do the note, see the patient, do the note. Don't wait till the end. Don't worry about being late for the next person, because the other thought that's so important is that it's 3 minutes now or 20 minutes later. And we have so many mental tabs we're opening up all day that when you get to the bottom of I don't know what the equivalent of the assessment and plan is, or if it's the same, but we're just we're right there. And then we're I'm to go see the next patient. It's like running a marathon. You're like at the finish line. You're like, I'll do it later. And I'm going to run the whole race again at the end of the day.
Yeah, because you have to reread
Mhm.
everything you'd written.
It's all those difficult decisions you've made. Was it this tooth? Was it this treatment?
Mhm.
Was it this? So if you do it in the moment, it might take you 3 minutes. If you do it at the end of the day, it's going to take you about 15 or 20 minutes. And then you multiply that by how many people you see in a day, and you realize, oh my gosh, it would have taken me maybe 45 minutes, let's say, to get caught up. But now I have 5 hours of work that is going to hang over me and ruin my weekend. So it's 3 minutes now, 20 minutes later, see the patient, do the note, and don't check your email during the day. Do not do that.
Oh, I love that one.
Interrupts your focus and your flow. It takes you out. And then if you go back in, it tires your brain. So don't do that. There shouldn't be emergencies in your email. If there are, we got to figure out a system for that, because they shouldn't be.
Absolutely. Oh, so powerful.
Ah,
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for doing the incredible work that you do in this world and supporting the women who care for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you too, Tarryn. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you to all of you for joining us today and for welcoming this super special woman into your world. And remember, when you feel good, that's when you can do good. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Business of Happiness podcast. If this episode brought you new perspective and value, I invite you to subscribe so that you catch all upcoming episodes and leave us a review. And if you know of a friend or colleague who could benefit from this perspective, share this episode with them and empower their day. For more information about the Business of Happiness and the Radical Happiness for Practitioners course, find me on www.thebizofhappiness.com. See you there.